The following document came into my possession under circumstances I am still not entirely comfortable disclosing. Suffice it to say that in the autumn of 1954, while cataloging materials salvaged from a partially collapsed library in the old quarter of Salzburg, I discovered a leather-bound diary sealed within a metal box that had been bricked into a wall behind a false bookshelf. The box bore no marking save for a single word etched into the lid in what appeared to be Latin: Noli apparar, do not open. I opened it anyway. The diary within was written in German, in a careful feminine hand, and dated 1883. The author identifies herself as Helena Marsh, a young Englishwoman who had traveled to Austria to serve as governess to a wealthy family. The diary chronicles approximately 7 months of her life, though the final entries suggest a far longer subjective experience. Several pages have been torn out. Others are stained with substances I have chosen not to analyze too closely. The handwriting deteriorates significantly as the entries progress, becoming nearly illegible toward the end. I have translated the text as faithfully as possible, preserving the author's style and peculiarities of expression. Where the original German is unclear or the pages damaged, I have noted the gaps. I should mention that during the 6 months I spent working on this translation, I experienced a recurring dream. In it, I am walking through a house I have never seen, looking for something I cannot name. The house is always changing, always shifting, and I am always lost. I wake from these dreams with the certainty that someone is watching me, that somewhere, in some vast and empty place, something knows my name. I do not recommend reading this diary after dark. I do not recommend reading it at all if you value your peace of mind. But you will read it anyway, just as I translated it, just as Helena Marsh wrote it. Some compulsions cannot be resisted. Dr. Friedrich Adler, Vienna, March 1955. April 3rd, 1883. I write these first words with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Today I have arrived at Schloss Wolfstein, the ancestral estate of the von Rothenberg family, where I am to serve as governess to their daughter, Elisabeth. The position was arranged through an agency in London, and the terms were exceptionally generous, far more than I might have expected for a first appointment. Perhaps I should have questioned this generosity more closely. The journey from Vienna was long and uncomfortable. The train took me as far as a small village called Steinbach, nestled in a valley surrounded by dark forests and mountains that seemed to lean inward, as if listening. From there, I traveled by carriage along roads that grew progressively narrower and more poorly maintained, until finally we left the roads altogether and followed what appeared to be little more than a cart track through dense woods. The driver was a local man who spoke German with a thick dialect I could barely comprehend. He seemed nervous, glancing repeatedly into the forest on either side of the track. When I asked him what he was looking for, he muttered something about Die Stillen, the silent ones, and would say no more. As evening approached, we emerged from the forest onto a plateau, and I beheld Schloss Wolfstein for the first time. I must attempt to describe it, though words feel inadequate to the task. The castle was built of dark gray stone, almost black in the fading light, and it rose from the rocky ground like a growth of the earth itself. It was not particularly large, perhaps 40 rooms in total, but there was something oppressive about its proportions. The towers were too tall and too narrow. The windows were spaced irregularly, as if placed by someone who had only a theoretical understanding of architecture. And the whole structure seemed to lean slightly to one side, though perhaps this was merely a trick of the light and the uneven ground. The driver deposited my luggage at the front entrance and departed with such haste that he nearly overturned the carriage. I watched him disappear back into the forest, then turned to face the castle alone. The front door opened before I could knock. A man stood in the doorway, tall, thin, perhaps 60 years of age, with gray hair and eyes so pale they appeared almost colorless. He was dressed in the formal manner of a head butler, though his clothes seemed decades out of fashion. "Miss Marsh," he said in perfect, unaccented English. "We have been expecting you. I am Karl, the house steward. Please come inside." I followed him into an entrance hall that was surprisingly modest for a castle. The ceiling was high, but the space was narrow, and the walls were bare stone with no decoration save for a few tarnished sconces holding candles that provided insufficient light. A staircase rose to my left, ascending into shadows. "The family is at dinner," Carl informed me. "You will meet them tomorrow. Tonight, I will show you to your room, and a meal will be brought to you. The castle keeps irregular hours. It is best if you remain in your quarters until you have been properly introduced." There was something in his tone, a warning, perhaps, or merely the formal correctness of a lifelong servant, that made me uneasy. But I was tired from travel, and the prospect of a meal and rest was welcome. He led me up the staircase to the second floor, then along a corridor that seemed to extend far beyond what the exterior dimensions of the castle should allow. We passed dozens of doors, all closed, and I heard no sound from any of them. The castle was utterly silent. My room was at the end of the corridor. It was simply furnished: a bed, a wardrobe, a writing desk, a washstand. A single window looked out over the plateau toward the forest. In the deepening twilight, I could just make out what appeared to be standing stones arranged in a circle at the edge of the tree line, perhaps a quarter-mile from the castle. "The stones are very old," Carl said, noticing my gaze. "They were here long before the castle was built. The local people believe they mark a boundary that should not be crossed. Superstitious nonsense, of course, but the family prefers that staff do not venture too close to them." He left me then, and I heard the door close softly behind him. I did not hear his footsteps retreating down the corridor, which struck me as odd. The floors were bare stone, and should have echoed. I am writing this entry by candlelight, sitting at the desk, looking occasionally toward the window where the standing stones are now invisible in the darkness. I should sleep. Tomorrow I will meet my charge and begin my duties. But I find myself reluctant to extinguish the candle. The darkness beyond my small circle of light seems unusually deep, unusually patient, as if it is waiting for something. April 4th, 1883. I met the von Rothenberg family this morning at breakfast, which was served in a dining room that seemed too large for the 4 people present. Baron Friedrich von Rothenberg is a man in his mid-40s, handsome in a severe way, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes that hold a peculiar intensity. He greeted me politely but with a certain distance, as if his mind were occupied with matters of far greater importance than a new governess. His wife, Baroness Katerina, is considerably younger, perhaps 30, and possessed of a fragile beauty that seems ill-suited to this austere setting. She barely spoke during the meal, picking at her food with nervous fingers and occasionally glancing toward the windows as if expecting to see something there. And then there is Elisabeth. She is 10 years old, small for her age, with pale blonde hair and eyes of such a light blue they appear almost gray. She watched me throughout the meal with an unblinking gaze that I found profoundly unsettling. When I smiled at her, she did not smile back. She simply continued to stare, her expression neither friendly nor hostile, merely observant. After breakfast, the Baron took me aside to discuss my duties. "Elisabeth is a special child," he said. "She is highly intelligent but has certain difficulties with normal social interaction. She requires patience and understanding. You will tutor her in English, French, mathematics, and the arts. You will also ensure she takes regular exercise, though she must not leave the castle grounds. That is essential. Do you understand? She must never venture beyond the plateau." "Of course, Baron," I replied. "May I ask why?" His expression darkened. "The forest is dangerous. There are animals, wolves, primarily, though other things as well. Things that are not easily explained. Elisabeth knows she must not leave the grounds, but she has a curious nature. You must watch her carefully." He paused, then added, "My daughter has been known to sleepwalk. If you ever find her wandering at night, you must return her to her room immediately and inform me at once. This is not a request, Miss Marsh. It is a condition of your employment." I assured him I understood, though I found the intensity of his concern somewhat excessive. Children sleepwalk. It is not uncommon. But I am being paid well to follow the family's rules, however peculiar they may seem. I spent the afternoon with Elisabeth in the schoolroom, assessing her level of education. She is indeed remarkably intelligent. Her English is nearly perfect, her mathematical skills well beyond her years, and she reads Latin and Greek with ease. But there is something odd about the way she learns. She does not seem to memorize by rote, as most children do, but rather appears to absorb information instantaneously, as if it were being written directly into her mind. When I complimented her on her Latin, she looked at me with those pale, unblinking eyes and said, "Latin is useful for reading the old books in the library. The books about the stones and what came before. Do you read Latin, Miss Marsh?" "I do," I said. "Good," she replied. "Then perhaps you can help me translate something. There are passages I don't understand. Passages about the threshold and what waits beyond it." I was about to ask her what she meant when the Baroness appeared in the doorway, her face tight with some emotion I could not identify. "Elisabeth," she said sharply, "we do not discuss those books. You know this." The child's expression did not change. "Yes, Mama." The Baroness left without another word, but I noticed her hands were shaking. That was this morning. It is now evening, and I am back in my room, writing by candlelight once again. I can hear sounds in the castle now that I did not notice last night. Distant footsteps, the creak of floorboards, and occasionally, from somewhere deep within the structure, a sound like stone grinding against stone. I went to the window a few moments ago and looked out toward the standing stones. There was a figure there, standing in the center of the circle, too far away to identify, but perfectly still, as if it had been carved from the same ancient rock. As I watched, it turned its head toward the castle, toward my window. I stepped back quickly and drew the curtains. My heart is racing as I write this. I tell myself it was likely a servant or perhaps the Baron himself, taking an evening walk. But I cannot shake the feeling that whatever I saw in that stone circle is still watching, still waiting. April 7th, 1883. 3 days have passed since my last entry. I've been meaning to write but have found myself strangely exhausted each evening, barely able to remain awake past sunset. The Baroness tells me this is normal, something about the altitude or the quality of the air. But I have never experienced such overwhelming fatigue before. My days have fallen into a routine. I breakfast alone in my room. I tutor Elisabeth from 9 until noon. We take lunch together in the schoolroom. Simple meals brought by servants I rarely see and never hear. More lessons in the afternoon, and then Elisabeth is taken away by her mother, and I am free until dinner, which I usually take alone in my room as well. I have seen very little of the castle beyond my own quarters and the schoolroom. When I asked Karl if I might explore, he looked uncomfortable and said that many of the rooms were closed off for repairs. He suggested I might walk on the plateau for exercise, but warned me again not to approach the stone circle. Elisabeth grows stranger by the day. She is an attentive student, but her questions are becoming increasingly peculiar. Yesterday, during a mathematics lesson, she asked me, "If a space can fold back on itself, Miss Marsh, would the distance between 2 points become 0? If you walked far enough in one direction, would you end up where you started?" I explained that she was describing a sphere, and that yes, theoretically, one could circumnavigate it and return to one starting point. "But what if the folding went deeper?" she pressed. "What if the space folded in directions we cannot see? What if there were places where distance itself stops meaning anything?" I had no answer for her. Where does a 10-year-old child learn to ask such questions? Today she showed me something that disturbed me greatly. We were in the schoolroom, and she was supposed to be practicing her penmanship. Instead, I found her drawing in her notebook. The image was complex and precise, a series of interlocking geometric shapes that seemed to shift and reconfigure the longer I looked at them. The lines folded back on themselves in ways that should not have been possible on a flat page, creating the illusion of depth and dimension. "What is this?" I asked. "The pattern," she said simply. "The one from the library books. The one the stones make when you look at them correctly. Elisabeth, these books you keep mentioning, may I see them?" She shook her head. "Father locked the library after I started reading them. He says they contain knowledge that is dangerous for children. But I remember the patterns. I see them when I close my eyes. And sometimes." She paused, her pale gaze fixing on me with uncomfortable intensity. Sometimes I see them in the walls. In the walls? The castle is built on the pattern, she said, as if explaining something obvious to a slow pupil. The same pattern as the stones. The same pattern that appears in the old books. It's all connected. The castle, the stones, the threshold, the silent ones. Everything is part of the same structure. I was about to press her further when we were interrupted by a scream. It came from somewhere below us, a woman's voice, high and terrible. Elisabeth did not even flinch. She simply set down her pen and said, "That's Mama. She has bad days sometimes." I rushed from the schoolroom and down the stairs, following the sound. I found the Baroness in what appeared to be a sitting room on the first floor, being restrained by Karl and another servant I had not seen before. She was struggling against them, her eyes wild, trying to reach the window. "They're calling me," she sobbed. "Can't you hear them? They're calling and I have to answer. I have to go to them." The Baron appeared, carrying a small bottle. He forced several drops of some liquid between his wife's lips. She struggled for a moment longer, then went limp in the servant's arms. They carried her from the room, and I was left alone with the Baron. "Forgive the disturbance, Miss Marsh," he said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "My wife suffers from nervous complaints. They are more severe here than in Vienna. We may need to send her to a sanitarium soon." "What was she talking about?" I asked. "Who is calling her?" His expression grew cold. "The ravings of an unwell mind, nothing more. I suggest you return to Elisabeth. And, Miss Marsh, I trust you will not repeat what you witnessed here." It was not a request. I returned to the schoolroom to find Elisabeth exactly where I had left her, still drawing her impossible patterns. She did not ask about her mother. She did not seem concerned in the least. As I write this now, in my room, I can hear footsteps pacing back and forth in the corridor outside. They have been going for the past hour, the same measured tread, up and down, never stopping. I opened my door to look, but the corridor was empty. The footsteps continued. I have locked my door and pushed the writing desk against it. I know this is irrational. I know the sounds are likely just the castle settling, or servants going about their duties, or any number of mundane explanations. But I no longer trust what I know. April 12th, 1883. I have not been entirely honest in my previous entries. I have been reluctant to commit to paper certain observations and experiences, fearing they might reveal me to be as unstable as the Baroness appears to be. But if I am going mad, then perhaps setting down the truth will help me understand the progression of my delusions. Or perhaps, and this is what truly terrifies me, I am not mad at all. The castle is wrong. I do not mean merely that it is old or poorly designed or has an unsettling atmosphere. I mean that it is structurally, geometrically, fundamentally wrong in ways that should not be possible. I have begun mapping my movements, keeping track of the route from my room to the schoolroom, to the dining hall, to the few other locations I am permitted to visit. The distances do not remain constant. Sometimes the corridor outside my room extends for what must be 100 feet before reaching the staircase. Other times, the staircase seems to appear after only 20 feet. The number of doors along the corridor changes. Yesterday, I counted 17. Today there are 23. And the doors themselves, I have begun to notice something disturbing. They're never quite in the same positions. A door that was on my left yesterday will be on my right today. A door that stood opposite a window now stands opposite bare wall. I have tried to discuss this with Karl, but he becomes evasive and changes the subject. The servants, the few I have glimpsed, will not meet my eyes. Only Elisabeth seems unbothered. When I mentioned that the castle seemed strangely laid out, she smiled for the first time since I arrived. "It shifts," she said simply. "Father doesn't like to acknowledge it, but we all know. The castle is alive in its own way. It breathes. It moves. It responds to what happens within it. Buildings do not move, Elisabeth. This one does, because it was built by people who understood geometry better than we do, better than anyone does now. They knew how to make spaces that exist in more than 3 dimensions, spaces that can fold and unfold. The castle is just the part we can see. The rest of it extends into places we cannot perceive. She spoke with such calm certainty that I found myself believing her, at least for a moment. The worst part is the dreams. Every night since I arrived, I have dreamed of walking through the castle. But in the dreams, the castle is vast, endlessly vast, with corridors that stretch into infinity and rooms the size of cathedrals. And I am not alone in these dreams. There are others walking the same corridors, though I can never see them clearly. They move in my peripheral vision, tall and thin and utterly silent. And there is something else. Something that I can feel, but not see. Something vast and patient that exists in the spaces between the walls, watching as I walk, waiting for something I do not understand. I wake from these dreams drenched in sweat, my heart racing, with the absolute certainty that I have not been dreaming at all, that I have been walking, that somewhere in this impossible structure there is a version of me that never woke up, that is still walking, still searching, still lost. April 18th, 1883. The Baroness has been sent away. She had another episode 3 days ago, worse than the first. According to Karl, she was found in the entrance hall at midnight, fully dressed, attempting to open the front door. When the Baron stopped her, she became violent. She screamed that they were calling her name, that she had to go to them, that they had been waiting so long and she could not make them wait any longer. It took 3 servants to restrain her. She was taken to Vienna the following morning. I doubt she will return. Elisabeth seems entirely unaffected by her mother's departure. When I tried to offer comfort, she looked at me with those pale, emotionless eyes and said, "Mama was always too weak. She could hear them, but she couldn't understand them." That made her afraid. But fear is useless here, Miss Marsh. Fear doesn't change what's coming. What is coming, Elisabeth? The threshold is weakening. The stones don't hold as well as they once did. Something is going to come through. Or perhaps. She paused, tilting her head as if listening to something I could not hear. Perhaps we're going to go through to them. I'm not certain which direction the crossing will occur. I should have reported this conversation to the Baron. I should have expressed concern about Elisabeth's state of mind. But the truth is, I am no longer certain she is the one who is unwell. I have started to hear them too.
Not voices, exactly.
More like a pressure against the inside of my skull. A sense of words without sound, meaning without language. And it is strongest near the windows that face the standing stones. Last night I could not resist. I went to my window and opened the curtains. The stones were glowing. Not brightly, just a faint phosphorescence like foxfire or swamp gas. But it was unmistakable in the darkness. And within the circle, there were figures.
Dozens of them.
Tall and impossibly thin, standing in perfect stillness. As I watched, they all turned their heads toward the castle in perfect unison. Toward my window, I saw no faces. Where faces should have been, there was only darkness. A darkness that seemed deeper than the mere absence of light. A darkness that suggested vast, empty spaces extending into infinity. I do not remember closing the curtains. I do not remember returning to bed. I woke this morning fully dressed, my shoes caked with mud, though I have no memory of leaving my room. There was a small stone on my pillow. Ancient, weathered. The same type of stone as those in the circle. It should not have been possible for it to be there. My door was locked from the inside. The window was latched. But there it was. I have hidden it in my wardrobe. I am too frightened to throw it away. Too frightened to tell anyone about it. Too frightened to admit what it means. They have been inside my room. April 24th, 1883. I attempted to leave today. The situation has become untenable. The Baron barely acknowledges my presence. Elisabeth has ceased even pretending to attend to her lessons. She spends hours drawing her geometric patterns and muttering in what sounds like Latin or perhaps something older. The servants avoid me entirely. And the castle itself seems to be closing in around me, the corridors narrowing, the ceilings lowering, the walls leaning inward with malevolent intent. I packed my belongings, composed a letter of resignation, and made my way to the front entrance shortly after dawn. The door was locked. I tried every window on the ground floor, all locked or sealed. I found a side entrance near what I believed to be the kitchens, locked as well. I was attempting to force a window when Carl found me. "You cannot leave, Miss Marsh," he said quietly. "This is absurd," I replied. "I am not a prisoner. Open the door at once." "I cannot. The Baron has ordered it. You must remain until—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "Until the crossing is complete." "What crossing?"
What are you talking about?
He looked at me with something that might have been pity. "You were chosen, Miss Marsh. Surely you must have suspected. We do not simply hire governesses through London agencies. Every person who comes to Schloss Wolfstein is brought here for a purpose." "What purpose?" "The threshold requires anchors, bridges between this world and the space beyond. The von Rothenberg family has served this function for generations. But the bloodline is weakening. The Baron's line will end with Elisabeth. They need reinforcements, others who can perceive the boundaries, others whose minds can adapt to what lies beyond." "You're insane," I said. "Perhaps. But you have already begun to see them, haven't you? You have heard the calling. You have walked in your sleep and returned with no memory of where you went. You are becoming what they need you to become." I fled from him then, back to my room, where I have remained since. It is now evening. I have pushed every piece of furniture against the door. I know it will not keep them out if they truly wish to enter, but it provides some small illusion of safety. I can hear movement in the walls now. Not rats or mice. Something much larger. Moving in spaces that should not exist within the structure of the building. And from outside my window, from the direction of the stones, I can hear something else. A sound like singing, but in no language human throats were meant to produce. It rises and falls in rhythms that make my head ache and my vision blur. I am writing this by candlelight. The flame keeps flickering though there is no draft. And occasionally, in the darkness beyond its reach, I see movement. Shadows that have no source. Shapes that dissolve when I try to look at them directly. They are patient. They can afford to be. Where would I go?
The doors are locked.
The castle is isolated. And even if I could escape the building, what then? Would I run into the forest, where worse things almost certainly wait?
No.
I am trapped. I have been trapped since the moment I accepted this position. Perhaps I was trapped even before that. Perhaps this was always where I was meant to end up. The candle is burning low. Soon I will be in darkness. I am not certain I will survive the night. And I am not certain that survival is what I should be hoping for. April 27th, 1883, I did survive. Though I use that word loosely. The night of the 24th, the night I was certain would be my last, the door to my room opened. I had not heard footsteps. I had not heard the furniture being moved aside. But when I looked up from where I had been huddling on the bed, the door was standing open and the corridor beyond was dark and empty. I should have stayed where I was. Every instinct screamed at me to remain in my room, pathetic as its protection might be. But something drew me out. Not a voice, not a sound, just a certainty that I was meant to go. I went. The castle was transformed. Or perhaps I was seeing it truly for the first time. The corridors extended far beyond their normal length, stretching into a distance that should not have been containable within the structure. The walls were no longer solid stone but seemed thin, translucent, as if I were looking through layers of gauze to something beyond. And beyond them, I could see the spaces between. I lacked the language to properly describe what I witnessed. Imagine trying to explain color to someone born blind, or music to someone born deaf. How do you describe dimensions that human perception was never equipped to process? There were structures there. Vast architectural forms that existed in more than 3 dimensions, folding through spaces perpendicular to our reality. They were beautiful and terrible in equal measure, geometries so perfect and complex that merely looking at them caused a physical pain behind my eyes. And within these structures, they moved. The silent ones. I saw them clearly for the first time. They were tall, impossibly tall, perhaps 12 or 15 feet if height has any meaning in that place. Their bodies were elongated, stretched, as if they existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, and what I was seeing was merely the shadow they cast into our three-dimensional space. They had limbs, though they bent in ways that defied anatomy. They had heads, though what served as faces bore no resemblance to human features. And they saw me. I felt their attention turn toward me like a physical weight. And in that moment of recognition, I understood what they were. Not invaders. Not monsters. Not even enemies in any meaningful sense. They were the original inhabitants. Humanity had built our reality on top of theirs, like constructing a house on ground that was already occupied. For eons, we had existed in ignorance of the space beneath our feet. But there were always places where the boundaries were thin. Places where the two realities touched. Places like Schloss Wolfstein. The castle had been built deliberately on such a place. The von Rothenberg family had served for generations as watchers, maintaining the threshold, ensuring that neither reality encroached too far upon the other. But the balance was failing. The boundaries were weakening. And soon, perhaps very soon, the two spaces would merge. What would happen then, I could not begin to guess. Would we be absorbed into their reality? Would they flood into ours? Would both worlds simply cease to exist in any recognizable form? I do not know how long I walked through those corridors, seeing things that should not be seen, understanding things that should not be understood. Time had no meaning there. I might have been walking for minutes or for days. When I finally came back to myself, I was standing in the entrance hall. Dawn light was filtering through the windows. Elisabeth was standing before me, and behind her, the Baron. "You see them now," Elisabeth said. It was not a question. "Yes," I whispered. "Good," said the Baron. "Then your education can truly begin." May 3rd, 1883, I have been given access to the library. It occupies the entire western tower of the castle, 7 floors of shelves packed with volumes in dozens of languages, many of which I do not recognize. The Baroness escorts me there each morning and collects me each evening. I am not permitted to remove books from the room, but I may read whatever I wish while I am there. The knowledge contained in these volumes is staggering and terrible. The oldest texts date back thousands of years, to civilizations that existed before recorded history. They speak of a time when the boundaries between realities were even thinner than they are now, when commerce between worlds was commonplace. The builders of the great megaliths, Stonehenge, Karnak, the temples of Malta, were not creating monuments to gods or kings. They were constructing anchors, weights to hold reality in place, to prevent the spaces from bleeding too thoroughly into one another. But over millennia, the knowledge was lost. The anchors fell into disrepair. The thin places grew thinner. Families like the von Rothenbergs kept watch. They maintained what they could. They performed the necessary rituals. They ensured that the boundaries remained stable enough to prevent catastrophic merging. But it is not enough. It has never been enough. The boundaries continue to weaken, and there are too few watchers remaining. They need more anchors. More minds capable of perceiving both realities simultaneously. More bridges between worlds. They need people like me. Elisabeth comes to the library often. We read together, she explaining concepts that I struggle to grasp. She is far more advanced in this study than I am. She has been trained since birth to perceive the spaces between, to navigate the folded geometries, to communicate, after a fashion, with the silent ones. They are not evil, she tells me. They are simply different. They exist in ways we do not. And they are just as disturbed by our encroachment into their space as we are by theirs into ours. What is happening here, what the castle facilitates, is a negotiation. An attempt to find a way for both realities to coexist without destroying each other. And if the negotiation fails? She looks at me with those pale eyes, and for a moment I see something vast and ancient looking back. Then one reality will consume the other. Either we will fall into their space and cease to exist in any form we would recognize as human, or they will be forced into ours and be similarly unmade. There is no third option. Why me? I ask. Why was I brought here? Because you can see. Not everyone can. Most people's minds are too rigid, too bound to three-dimensional thinking. They look at the thin places and see nothing. Or they see just enough to go mad, like my mother.
But you can see and remain sane.
You can adapt. That makes you valuable. I do not want to be valuable. None of us do. But the duty exists regardless of our desires. I spend my evenings in my room, writing these entries, trying to maintain some connection to the person I was before I came here. But that person grows more distant each day. I can feel myself changing, my perception expanding, my understanding deepening. When I look at walls now, I see through them, not metaphorically, literally. I see the spaces beyond, the folded dimensions, the structures that exist in places perpendicular to our reality. And I see them, the silent ones, always watching, always waiting. They are patient. They have been patient for longer than human civilization has existed. They can wait a little longer. May 15th, 1883, something is going to happen soon. I can feel it in the air, in the stones of the castle, in the very fabric of space itself. The boundaries are growing dangerously thin. The Baron has been conducting rituals in the Great Hall. I am not permitted to attend, but I can hear them from my room, chanting in languages that predate Latin, accompanied by sounds I cannot identify. Sometimes the entire castle shakes, as if reality itself is shuddering. Elisabeth spends most of her time at the standing stones now. I watch her from my window, standing in the center of the circle, her arms outstretched, perfectly still for hours at a time. She is communicating with them, I think. Or perhaps she is becoming one of them. The distinction grows less clear each day. I have begun to experience blackouts. I will be reading in the library or writing in my room, and then suddenly I am somewhere else with no memory of how I got there. Yesterday I woke, standing in a corridor I had never seen before, 3 floors below ground level according to my subsequent investigation. The walls there are older than the rest of the castle, ancient stone covered in symbols that hurt to look at. And I have started sleepwalking again. Or at least I assume it is sleepwalking, though I have no memory of it. I wake to find mud on my feet and clothes, as if I have been walking outside. Sometimes I find small objects on my pillow or desk, stones from the circle, fragments of bone, other things I cannot identify. They are leaving me gifts. Or warnings.
Or both.
The servants have all left now except for Karl. He moves through the castle like a ghost, bringing meals I barely touch, maintaining fires I no longer need for warmth. He speaks rarely, and when he does, it is to remind me that the crossing is coming soon. Days, he said this morning. Perhaps only hours. The alignment is almost perfect. The ritual is nearly complete. You must be ready. Ready for what? To choose. Choose what? Which side of the threshold you will stand on when it opens. He left before I could ask what he meant. I am writing this entry while I still can. While my mind is still mostly my own. Because I can feel it slipping away bit by bit. The person I was, Helena Marsh, English governess, 24 years old, daughter of a country vicar, educated in London, fond of tea and romantic poetry, she is fading like a photograph left in sunlight. In her place, something else is emerging. Something that can perceive realities human minds were never meant to process. Something that can exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Something that is neither wholly human nor wholly silent one, but somewhere between. A bridge. That is what they need. That is what I am becoming. And the terrible truth is that I am not certain I want to resist. The knowledge I have gained, the perspectives I have achieved, they are worth any price. I have seen wonders beyond human comprehension. I have glimpsed the fundamental architecture of reality itself. How can I return to the mundane world after this? How can I go back to teaching French irregular verbs and watercolor painting when I have seen the spaces between spaces? The answer is simple. I cannot. I am theirs now. Or perhaps I always was, and it simply took coming to Schloss Wolfstein to realize it. May 21st, 1883, the threshold opened tonight. I should be terrified. I should be mad with fear. Instead, I feel only a vast, calm certainty that this was always meant to happen. It began at sunset. The Baron summoned me to the Great Hall, where Elisabeth already waited. The room had been prepared. the furniture removed, symbols painted on the floor in what I sincerely hope was not blood, candles arranged in patterns that created shadows with too many dimensions. The alignment is perfect, the Baron said. The boundaries are at their thinnest. Tonight, we will open the threshold fully and completely. Not just a crack through which they can reach, but a true opening. A bridge between realities. Why? I asked. Because the alternative is collapse. The boundaries are failing whether we act or not. Better to control the opening than to have it happen chaotically. Better to negotiate than to collide. And what is my role in this? He looked at me with something that might have been compassion. You are the anchor on this side. Elisabeth is the anchor on theirs. You are the 2 points between which the bridge will be constructed. It will be difficult. You may not survive with your mind intact. But if we succeed, both realities will be preserved. If we fail... He did not finish the sentence. The ritual began. I cannot adequately describe what followed. The chanting, the geometric patterns traced in the air with burning incense, the way the very fabric of space began to warp and fold, all of it is beyond my ability to articulate. But I remember the moment when the threshold opened. It was not dramatic. There was no explosion of light or sound. Simply a thinning, a transparency. The walls of the great hall became translucent, then invisible, and beyond them I could see the spaces between. And they came through. Not invading. Not attacking. Simply crossing. The silent ones flowed into our reality, like water flowing into a depression, moving with that eerie fluid grace, existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions, their forms shifting and reconfiguring with each step. They surrounded us. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Perhaps thousands. It was impossible to count beings that existed partially in spaces I could not fully perceive. And they spoke. Not in words. Not in any language human ears were meant to process. But I understood. We all understood. They were afraid. Just as we were afraid of them, they were afraid of us. Our reality was crushing theirs, slowly but inexorably, like a hand closing around something fragile. They had been calling out for generations, trying to warn us, trying to find someone who could understand. The von Rothenberg family had understood. They had built the castle as a meeting place, a neutral ground where both realities could touch without destroying each other. They had maintained it for centuries, waiting for the day when the boundaries would be thin enough for true communication. That day was now. Elisabeth stepped forward. She was glowing, actually glowing, with a light that came from within her, or perhaps from beyond her, from the spaces she straddled. She raised her hand, and one of the silent ones mirrored the gesture. Their hands met. Where they touched, reality folded. I saw it happen. I saw the space between their hands collapse into itself, creating a point of perfect union between the two realities. And from that point, the bridge began to grow. It spread outward like crystalline growth, geometries folding and interlocking, creating a structure that existed in both realities simultaneously. It was beautiful. It was terrible. It was absolutely beyond anything I had imagined possible. And I felt myself being drawn into it. Not physically. My body remained in the Great Hall. But my consciousness, my awareness, my essential self, was being pulled into the bridge structure, integrated into its framework, becoming part of the architecture itself. I understood then what the Baron had meant. I was not witnessing the bridge. I was becoming the bridge. My mind, my perception, my ability to see both realities, it was all being woven into the structure that would allow both worlds to coexist. I should have been frightened. I should have fought against it. But I did not. Because in that moment, I understood everything. The universe is far vaster than humans have ever conceived. Reality is not a single plane, but an infinite series of overlapping dimensions, each with its own laws and structures and inhabitants. We occupy one tiny slice of this vast multidimensional space, and we have always assumed we were alone. We were wrong. There are others. Countless others. The silent ones are merely one of many consciousnesses that exist in spaces adjacent to our own. And the boundaries between these spaces are not fixed. They shift. They thin. They fold. And sometimes, when the conditions are right and minds capable of bridging the gap are present, the boundaries can be crossed. I am crossing now. As I write these words, and I am writing, though my hand moves of its own accord, and I am not certain which reality contains the paper and ink I am using, I am becoming something other than human. Something more. Something less. Something different. I can feel Elisabeth beside me, though she is very far away. I can feel the silent ones surrounding me, though they are inside me as much as outside. I can feel the castle and the stones and the ancient geometries that connect them all. I can feel everything. And I understand that this was always going to happen. That every choice I made, every path I took, led inevitably to this moment. I was always meant to come to Schloss Wolfstein. I was always meant to become the bridge. There is no escape from what we are meant to be. Date unknown, time has stopped meaning anything. I am not certain how long I have been here, days, weeks, months, years. The concept of duration no longer applies in any way I can articulate. I exist now in the space between. The bridge is complete, and I am part of its structure. I can see both realities simultaneously. I can perceive dimensions that human language has no words for. I can feel the vast consciousness of the silent ones flowing through me and around me. And I can see the others like me. The other bridges. The other anchors. Elisabeth is here, though she has changed beyond recognition. The Baron is here, though he has been here far longer than I realized. Decades, perhaps centuries, his body long since turned to dust while his consciousness remains woven into the structure. And there are others. Hundreds of them. Perhaps thousands. Scattered across time and space, all of them serving the same function. All of them holding the boundaries stable. All of them keeping the realities from collapsing into chaos. We are the wardens of the threshold, the keepers of the gates, the bridges between worlds. And we will be here forever. I should be horrified. I should rage against this fate. But I cannot, because I understand now that this is not a prison. It is a purpose, a function, a necessary role in the vast architecture of reality itself. Without us, the boundaries would fail. The realities would collide. Everything would be unmade. With us, there is stability. There is order. There is the possibility of continuation for both our world and theirs. It is a sacrifice, but it is a necessary one. And I accept it. I have stopped fighting. I have stopped mourning the life I left behind. That person, Helena Marsh, she is gone now. She has been integrated into something larger, something eternal. I am the bridge. I will always be the bridge. And I am not alone. The handwriting deteriorates significantly here, becoming almost illegible. They will come looking for me eventually. Someone will notice that Helena Marsh never returned from Austria. Someone will investigate. Someone will find their way to Schloss Wolfstein. And when they do, they will see what I see. They will understand what I understand. And they will join us. Because the bridge is always hungry for more anchors. More minds capable of spanning the gap. More consciousness to weave into the eternal structure. If you are reading this, you are likely the one who came looking. You are likely standing in the library of Schloss Wolfstein, holding this diary, wondering what happened to me. Stop wondering. Look up. Look at the walls around you. Really look. Don't just see the surface. See through it. See the spaces beyond. They are there. They have always been there. And now that you are here, now that you have read this far, they can see you too. Welcome. Welcome to the bridge. Welcome to forever. I completed this translation 3 months ago. I have not returned to Salzburg. I have not returned to the archives. I have locked the original diary in a safe, to which only I have the key. But it does not matter. I see them now, in my peripheral vision, in reflections, in the spaces between things. And I have begun to dream of a castle in the mountains. A castle with too many rooms and corridors that shift when I am not looking. A castle that exists in more dimensions than I can count. Last night, I dreamed I was walking through its halls. And at the end of a long corridor, I found a door. And beyond the door, I found Helena. She was smiling. She said, "Welcome. We have been waiting for you." I woke screaming. But tonight, when I sleep, I know I will dream of the castle again. And I know that eventually, perhaps soon, perhaps in years, but inevitably, I will walk through that door. And I will not wake up. I am leaving this translation in my desk. Someone will find it after I am gone. Someone will read it. Someone will understand. And the cycle will continue. Because the bridge is eternal. And it is always hungry. Always. Dr. Friedrich Adler, Vienna, September 1955. Last entry. This document was found among the effects of Dr. Friedrich Adler following his disappearance in October 1955. He was last seen boarding a train to Salzburg. He never returned. An investigation found no record of his arrival in that city, nor any record of him checking into a hotel or contacting anyone there. The original German diary referenced in his translation has never been located. Attempts to verify the existence of Schloss Wolfstein have been unsuccessful. No such castle appears in any historical records. The von Rothenberg family, if it ever existed, has left no trace. And yet there are others. Others who have read this translation. Others who have reported dreams of a castle in the mountains. Others who have vanished while investigating the story of Helena Marsh. This document is now classified. It will be sealed in the archives and access will be restricted to authorized personnel only. But if you are reading this, then the seal has already been broken. The bridge has already seen you. And it is only a matter of time.